Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan, and this is Kings and Queens Chess Academy's YouTube channel. Today we're going to continue on Paul Morphy series, some of his greatest combinations. We have seen plenty of examples in our past videos about Paul Morphy and what he is so good at. Today we're going to see a couple of my favorite games in which he has some beautiful combinations to finish off the game. Let's go ahead and get started. The first one we're going to look at is the game played between Paulsen and Morphy in the year 1857, and Morphy is playing black. And this game I like in particular because it stresses the importance of dynamic play versus positional play, and we'll talk about it very quickly. So this was a position. I didn't want to show the whole game. We're just going to look at the main part of the game. This was a position where the whole thing started. Black has a few more active pieces compared to white. White still has to develop his bishop on c1 mainly, but white does have a better pawn structure. You can see that white's pawns are all like lined up, whereas black has these double pawns. So here white plays c3, and this is where everything starts. The first thing he does is he allows this square on d3 for Morphy to take control of. So Paul Morphy goes queen to d3. What does that do? That blocks his pawn out, which in turn blocks the bishop out. So that's actually a positional problem for white. Even though white's pawn formation is better, he has given a weak square, and that square is now becoming a blockade for an important thing that he needs to do, that is to push his center pawn out. The good news for white though is he still has the light squared bishop, so he can plan in future to chase his queen out. The queen on d3 cannot be there forever, hopefully, and you can chase it out, right? So this is not the end of the world. So let's see what happens. Paulsen plays b4, and after bishop b6 goes a4. So it makes a lot of sense. He's trying to expand on the queen side and still create problems. For example, if Morphy plays a6, this pawn captures pawn leaves white in this kind of a situation, black in this kind of a situation where I cannot recapture with either one of those pawns because I'm stuck in a double pin. And if I end up taking with the queen, I have lost my blockade on this one, which means this pawn will go up. So Morphy actually decides to play a very anti-positional move, which is pawn takes pawn. Why is this so anti-positional? Let's look at this. Look at this pawn structure that Morphy has. That's terrible. You don't want that. This is a doubled isolated pawn, and that's an isolated pawn. And look at this beautiful pawn structure for white. White's pawns are connected. So if you go to an endgame, white is going to be better any day. There's going to be no questions about it. Black will be struggling to hold this position with this kind of a pawn structure. But are we in an endgame? We're not. So that's the kind of balance you need to understand. That is, if you have active pieces, sometimes these long-term positional problems might be relevant because you could finish off the game, or you could create bigger problems using your active pieces. And that's kind of what happens in this game. So look at the next two move, classic Morphy bringing all his pieces into play, bishop to d7, a simple defensive move, but also make sure the rook is connected and getting ready to get out. So white played rook to a2, hoping that this pawn would not be a problem anymore in moving this bishop. But you will see white's moves are clearly off track here, because when you see the end, you will realize that white was not ready for what is coming up. Rook a2 definitely is not the best idea, so because it's too slow. Morphy goes rook a e8 again, setting up all his pieces. Now you can say that he's ready. Every single piece is ready. Yeah? And white offers a queen trade, queen to a6. You're pretty sure that Morphy did not trade queens, right? Okay, good. So Morphy definitely did not trade queens, but what did Morphy do here? If you want to pause the video and calculate, this is a great place to do this exercise, and it's actually a beautiful combination. You can spend more time if you want to. I hope you were able to calculate most of your variations, because the next move, queen captures f3, was played. It's a beautiful move. Morphy is sacrificing his queen for just a bishop. How can such a move even work? Well, it's possible because every white piece is on the wrong place. Even this rook, which looks like it's defending the king, cannot do anything against a king that's under attack from the front. So that would be kind of useless sitting on the side. This would be a good defender if I'm trying to attack you from the side. But in this case, black's pieces are all eyeing at the king. So I have four pieces, two major pieces, two rooks, and two bishops eyeing at the king. So Morphy is able to even get away with a queen sacrifice. Queen captures f3. Well, pawn captures is pretty forced. I guess the next move is pretty easy to guess. Rook g6 check. The king goes in. Now the follow-up also should not be very difficult because you have the rook in place. The only piece that can jump in the attack right now is this bishop. So Morphy goes bishop h3. Seeing up to this point should not be difficult, but the difficulty comes after this because most players find it very difficult to find the best defending move for white. In fact, in the game, Paulsen failed in finding the most important move and lost pretty quickly. The best defensive move, let's see if you can guess it, is queen to d3. Actually, let's go queen to d3 first. Yeah. What does this do? It actually targets that rook, which is the one that's creating the problem. What was black's threat? I was going to go bishop to g2 check. So I'm going to play a random move for white. Let's say I just play pawn to d4. So bishop to g2 check, king to g1, and bishop to f3 is checkmate. So this is the checkmate that you're dealing with. Now what does queen to d3 do? It actually targets at rook. So if you go bishop to g2 check, I'll go king to g1. You go bishop to f3 trying to do a checkmate, I actually give up my queen back. Remember, you sacrificed your queen already. So I don't mind giving the queen back. And even though black has compensation with these beautiful bishops, it's definitely not checkmate, and the game is far from over. And white is up in exchange. So if queen d3, I want to just show you the main variations. The only way to win this one is to make sure the rook is not under attack. So you have to block it with f5. Now, again, this rook is still what you want to target. So queen to c4 check is the only forcing move that's left on the board. Queen c4 check. I have a quick question for the viewers. Would you go to h8 or would you go to f8? I hope you picked the right one. King to h8 would not work because it gives white another chance to go queen f7 to target that rook. So you have to play the unnatural king f8 move, which looks like you're exposing your king, but that's the best move. Why? Because now this queen has no move to attack this rook. No way, I cannot approach it. Now let's try the other thing. What if I had gone king to h8? Ooh, now there is a problem. Not only is he actually targeting this rook, he is threatening checkmate this way too. So now you are not able to continue your attacking move because you also have to play a defensive move. So this would ruin everything. So king f8 is critical. Even after such beautiful combination, pay attention that even minor moves make a difference, right? And after king f8, black should just win because all the threats that we talked about are there, right? Now let me go back and ask actually a simpler question, which I probably should have asked very early in the game, is that why can't I simply move my rook to save this checkmate? This seems much simpler. There is no bishop to g2. I would say, I would request you viewers to find a checkmate in 3 really quickly. It's all forcing. So hopefully you figured it out. It's a check. And after captures, you follow up with the rook check. I said checkmate in 3 because don't forget that the queen can actually block and you can take it. And that's a 3-move checkmate. So rook to g1 was not possible and queen to d3 was a possible defense but doesn't work. In the game, Paulsen played rook d1. Now this is basically lost because after bishop check and bishop takes pawn check, I think the lonely king is not going to be able to deal with 2 bishops and 2 rooks. Nope, no way possible. So rook to g2 was actually a simpler way to finish. Morphy did not go for this, and there would be a cool double check, or I mean, it could be a double check or other checkmate. For example, queen to d3 would be met with check, and you got a double check with this bishop and the rook. And if I go here, you got a nice double checkmate because the bishop and the rook are both hitting the king. Would that be nice? Morphy went for bishop to g2, which is also winning. He went bishop h3 and then finally took this pawn. I guess he was eyeing for the double bishop checkmate this way. For example, if I play some move like this, that's a cool checkmate. White actually sacrificed the queen with queen f1, and the game didn't last much. After rook e2, now it's equal material, but Morphy is completely dominating on the 7th rank, and the end was after bishop to e3. If bishop captures e3, we have a really nice checkmate with 2 rooks on the 7th rank. 2 rooks on the 7th rank are extremely deadly. Very, very difficult to defend against. So, a beautiful game that kind of demonstrates the difference between dynamic and classical situation. White's pawn structure was fantastic, long-term advantage was there, but black, Paul Morphy, had active pieces and a queen sacrifice just finished off the game. Now, we move on to another one. I don't want to stop with one because I wanted to show you 2 beautiful combinations by Paul Morphy in this one. This is the next example that we're going to look at. And in this case, it's not actually more of a dynamic versus classical play because black actually has a great pawn structure. Let Look at this, right? Beautiful pawn structure. By the way, this is Bird playing white against Morphy in 1858, and also one of my favorite Morphy games. So let's start with what happens. Morphy goes rook to b8, hitting this pawn on b2, and white decides to castle long. Seems like a very natural move. And here the big kind of interesting question starts. Black can play any normal move and probably keep up a very reasonable position. Like I said, Black's pawn structure is very good, right? Black has the center, Black has a pawn chain, Black has more space. So many good things. But of course, Morphy is looking at the king. And we know Morphy by now, and we know how he plays. He's a very, very aggressive player. And I can't blame him because most of the chess games were played with flashy, great sacrifices and combinations. They were played for that. So during his time. So let's see what he does. The biggest problem he has is his queen is way off base. His queen is on the king side, and white did not castle on the king side. White castled on the queen side. So now how do we make use of this? Here comes a beautiful combination. Let's see if you can guess it. Kudos to you if you guessed Rook takes F2. It's a full rook that Morphy is giving up for free. Okay, what does it do? It gives him a beautiful opportunity to swing his queen all the way to the queen side with a queen sacrifice. Queen to a3. What's he doing here? He's just giving up his queen? Well, you cannot capture the queen because bishop takes a3 is a nice checkmate. I didn't even have to do anything. It's already game over. So white cannot take the queen. But what that quickly did is set up this 3-piece attack on this king with only like one queen defending. Again, timing is everything in Morphy's games. All these pieces become relatively useless in just like 2 moves. Because now the attack is immediate and none of those pieces can contribute. So white played pretty much the only move c3. And Morphy played queen captures a2. And he's just basically continuing the attack. The next move is going to be bishop in. And that pin is nice because, for example, let's me just play a move like this and show you bishop a3. Why is this so strong? Because there is a pin. This attack is too strong. If you take the bishop, I got checkmate. So at this point, it looks very difficult for white to defend against this, right? So white plays, again, a good move, b4. He doesn't want the bishop to get into a3. He also wants the queen to get in for defense. So he plays b4. And after queen a1 check, king c2 and queen a4 check, here comes the decisive mistake. White should have just played king back to c1. And I think black is doing good, but white could still play on. But a decisive mistake of king to b2 was played here. Let's see if you can guess Morphy's move. I hope you were able to figure it out, because all you need now is to get in, crash through that king's defenses. Bishop takes b4 was played. Pawn takes, rook takes. Now, it's pretty hopeless for the king to try to move because the queen and rook will easily checkmate the king. So, Bird decides to give queen takes b4. Now, you might say there is some hope for white. Why? Because black is only left with the queen and an undeveloped bishop. So, hopefully the checkmate will not happen. If checkmate doesn't happen, maybe, just maybe, I can use some of my pieces to defend. Yeah? So let's see what happens. After king c2, Morphy doesn't stop. He continues and he finds the best move, e3. Again, it's great to see him not valuing some of these pawns as much as the piece activity. Look at how much he values his pieces. He wants the bishop on that long diagonal attacking the king. And for that, he says, I don't want my pawn. I will get rid of that happily because I want a much more active bishop. Piece activity was everything for him, which is clearly visible in this, right? After pawn takes bishop f5 check, rook to d3 was played. White is still hanging on because if bishop d3, he still has 2 bishops and a rook for that queen. That's not so bad. But Morphy finds a sequence of queen c4 check. He wants to win this rook for free. So king had to go to d2. Queen a2 check again, not taking the rook yet. And if the king moves somewhere, he might lose this full bishop. So he has to go to d1 or e1 to save that bishop. He goes to d1. And now queen to b1 check. So what he's saying is, I actually want this rook or this rook. Because if you block this bishop, I get this rook. If you move the king, I get that rook. So either way, he picks up a full rook and with that wins the game. Again, 2 beautiful combinations. Hopefully you really enjoyed this. these are my favorite games from Paul Morphy. Again, attacking like this with piece coordination and bringing them together is usually a great way to play the game. Thank you for watching the video.